Welcome to Heartbeat on Zim Paper's television network. Now, this is your show on all things health and developmental, because your health is your wealth. My name is Robert Mkundiwa. And thanks to our partners, Say What and the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe for continuing in sponsoring this program and helping amplify the voices of millions of people who would otherwise not have a voice and say in things and issues that affect their own lives. Now, today we continue on a trajectory we started 2 weeks ago and shall be running for 3 more episodes in the series Beyond Today. Having noted with concern the key issues raised here and the key anxieties of students, as well as the absence of their voices in the discourse, 2 more episodes have been added to the series to demand adequate full closure for students, making this now a 6-part series. Our hats off yet again to our sponsors. We are putting the student on the Covid-19 agenda and bringing them to the heart of the discussion. This week, we continue looking at how the Covid-19 pandemic has impacted on especially tertiary students. And in this episode, we have a panel of vibrant young people who want their voices to be heard. This panel will unpack the pragmatism of e-learning in engineering and other practical subjects among a myriad of concerns the students have. I have 2 in-studio guests today and 2 more coming through over the telephone. First, I will allow my in-studio guests to introduce themselves and place themselves in the matrix that we're discussing today. I'll start, obviously, with a lady.
Thank you, Robert. My name is Munashe Maka, and I'm an engineering student at the University of Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Munashe. It's a pleasure having you today. And to the gentleman.
Yes, my name is Nigel Babu, and I'm an engineering consultant.
Well, man of few words, but I know you'll have a lot more words when we go forward, because there's a lot that we're going to unpack, especially in the field of engineering and e-learning. Now, over the phone, I shall be having a student from the MSU, Saddam Saungweme, on a live call, and a student from Kwekwe Polytechnic, Nomsa Madaka. Now, there are a lot of questions to be answered. Even if we get leadership eventually on the opening of tertiary institutions, that is just the beginning of the anxiety matrix. A majority of tertiary institutions are being used as quarantine centers, for example, across the country, raising a lot of questions on issues to do with safety of the students and their tutors when they finally open doors to the tertiary business. Is the government going to disinfect these facilities? All these questions continue to be raised by students who are anxious about their tertiary future. The emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has seen countries, including Zimbabwe, enforcing lockdowns, has worsened the plight of the student. Now, before we start, many asked the question of when universities will be opening. Now, we sought that clarity from the responsible minister for you. We also caught up with the Higher and Tertiary Education, Science and Technology Development Minister, Professor Amon Murura, who now speaks and informs us exclusively today on Heartbeat on the roadmap to opening up of those universities.
Yes, we are in the process of gradually approaching the opening of our higher and tertiary education institutions. But we are not in a rush. The issue is, in the meantime, we are working on online materials. And the universities are developing a unified system for the online system. Our priority is going to be with the final years in terms of actual physical presence. So we are going to do blended learning, which means a combination of online and presence. But we are not going to rush to put people at colleges physically. We are going to do it carefully with the health in mind, because school education is done by people who are living. So life first. And our approach is going to be gradual, it's going to be calculated, it's not going to, the only pressure that we have and that we should respond to is the pressure from the COVID virus. So that's what we are going to respond to, but we are going to make sure that we are going to undertake our education in healthy environments. So yes, in terms of online learning, we are almost done. Today in the afternoon, which is the 20th of May, I'm going to have a Zoom meeting with the Vice Chancellors and college principals to find out how far they are. So yes, we will be opening, but we are not rushing it. We are being careful.
Well, there you have it, Professor Murura. They're saying they would not hurry to open up institutions, noting that, quote, only the living can learn. Hence, their priority was to contain COVID-19 first. Now, before we go further with this, could you you've heard the Minister respond to a very key question, and this is a question a lot of you and your peers had in mind, and you finally gotten your answer. What do you make of what the Minister said there?
Well, I should say, in a way, for the final students, or from what I was picking up when he was saying that he's going to probably do it in stages, then I guess it's going to probably engage an issue of priorities. So I guess for all of us as students, our first years, second years, and third years, still really not a hopeful situation, because we are definitely not a priority when there are grade 7s, Form 4s, Form 6s, and final students ahead of us. So I guess it's not really an interesting answer.
Not an interesting answer. Nigel, are you interested in the answer? What is your take on what the Minister said?
Well, in as much as we are living in the 21st century, where computers are taking the lead, the Minister is right in the sense that we should take a gradual approach to re-engaging education, especially in the physical sense. Because let's be honest, COVID-19 is real and it's taking lives, right? And on e-learning, he said it's something about mixing the two, like practical.
Blended learning.
Exactly, blending the learning approach. It's actually good for engineering, because if you look at it, final years, they undergo what they call capstone design projects or dissertations, thesis, depending on where you're learning. So definitely you need sometimes to be physical with your instructor at the end of the day. So I actually say thumbs up to that, rather than just going full throttle on the e-learning button.
Perfect. Well, now with that in mind, where to for the student? Perhaps to start the questions, we can go back to e-learning, which as some of you may have known, if you have been following this series, it was quite a hot button issue. And I bring it back again to you guys. E-learning, the blended learning. Does everybody have that access? Is everybody comfortable with e-learning as a model, really, going forward? You did engineering. Is it practical, for example, to go that route and say, well, perhaps entirely, never mind the final year students, but everybody else may be asked to go the e-learning way, and there have been suggestions that we can do that. Do you think it's practical for an engineering student, for example, to study through e-learning?
You see, Robert, higher education and e-learning is like dancing with the devil, you know. There's a lot of things, there are a lot of gray areas, you know, like there's issues, the obvious issues of cheating. Like imagine you're writing an exam online. You can easily have another phone next to you, cheat and stuff like that. But now, if you look at engineering specifically, like I said, like in my before comment, you need to have hands-on experience. Like, for example, you take me through a course of applied mechanics, right? And then through online, I need to be practical with applied mechanics. You know, this is the subject that you use when you're building bridges, right? And then I do it online. I do not have the practical aspect. What happens when you put me in the field? You know, let's take Beshanov Bridge, for example. It needs repairs, right? And then you take an engineer with an online background. How are they going to apply the experiences there? So e-learning needs to answer two questions. Does it give the laboratory experience, or does it address what the accreditation boards actually outline in their constitutions and stuff?
Perfect. And you're anxious. You're saying you had this interesting answer that you were confronted with. If e-learning comes your way, do you think, looking at yourself, your circumstances, and perhaps the circumstances of the other people who are in similar classes, you're a student leader in your own way, do you think this is a very practical way of proceeding?
I will say it's practical in the sense that it will help us accomplish our studies and not stay at home. But you should also put in mind that when we are learning, there are some people who do not understand what the teacher is saying at all. So having my peers around to discuss with, having someone close by to actually ask, they can actually sometimes explain things in a way that you understand. Because when the teachers are doing that, they are doing it to a congregation of a lot of people. So you find that only a few people might understand what the teacher is saying. And some of us need those friends who understood to be there by our side and then help us slowly to also understand what the teacher was trying to say. So there still is need for that engagement.
Absolutely. Now, we had asked how practical will it be for people on similar programs, for example, to Nigel, to go the e-learning route, and that seems to be a point of contention. And keep your views and comments coming through, because we're going to be reading into them. And of course, we're also going to be seeing what people from around the country said, because through our partners, Say What, we went around the country to Bulawayo, to Mutare, and of course to Gweru, to find out what the students are doing and to also put them inside the matrix of this discussion so that we find out how things are going. Now, Nigel, you have had a practical experience of learning both in Zimbabwe and outside Zimbabwe. It's easier to put that e-learning matrix when you left the country, but that vis-a-vis your experiences in the country, what do you think needs to be bridged? What sort of gap do you think exists that needs to be dealt with if we're supposed to go the way of the blended learning, as it were?
Well, actually, a gap is an understatement. I would say there's a big hole, like a crater in between. Because I was reading an article, like I think a week ago, that Zimbabwe is still implementing 4G, you know, and other countries are already on 5G, you know. And for you to be able to do e-learning, I mean, I studied in Europe, but...
Whereabouts in Europe?
I was in Cyprus.
Okay.
I studied in Cyprus. And the lectures themselves did not do e-learning. They did not do video tutorials because of the challenges with the rigorous mathematics behind our courses. Sometimes, like my colleague said here, that sometimes you might not even understand the lecturer teaching. Now imagine you're watching a YouTube video, you see, and you want to concentrate, pop-ups are coming in and the internet is slow. And then bringing the issue back home, our infrastructure is not that spread out, you know. When people talk of e-learning, they only think of Harare, Bulawayo, Gweru. But what about those schools in like small towns, Kwekwe, where we do not have actually the infrastructure for 4G in place, you know? Yeah. So one might argue and say, you know what, you can actually engage those universities or polytechnics that have the infrastructure to help your students within the region, who stay within the region. But where's the signature move now? Because I believe each institution has got a signatory course to it. You know, like UZ, Boss of Law and Medicine, NAST of Engineering, and it doesn't make sense when UZ engages NAST to say, you know what, we've got a student in Bulawayo, can you take them for our practicals? So it defeats the purpose, you know. So practically, like the minister said, probably he needs to unpack his statement more on blended education, but it's a gradual step. We need to take it slowly because we were risking debarring our courses with the international boards, like the example, the ABET, Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology. The moment you change the approach to practical lessons, it means you're actually reducing the standards. It becomes
dodgy, doesn't it?
Exactly, it becomes dodgy, you know. I always talk to people that I do not discredit online engineering courses, but I've got only one question for them. Where did you do your practicals? If it's material science, where did you do your chemistry? You know, did you do it in the kitchen? Did you have the proper standards? You see, probably use toothpaste instead of using the proper chemical to mix, you know, because I was seeing some universities in America, like that was in between 2002 and 2005, they were exploring that, the e-learning method of, if it's a practical course, they send you a package you know, from their laboratory, and then you set it up on your own, but you do not know how to set up an experiment, you definitely need an instructor. So e-learning in our context, I think we're still about a century far from it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I actually want to also go to a social dimension of this and bring it to you, Muna, because what's going to happen is you're the first, second, third year students, and you're at home, and we seem to think that, okay, you're anxious, you're sitting at home, you're practically sitting at home doing nothing, and you're waiting for your exams or your tutorials to come through, and when they come through and you've got you get a bundle for Wi-Fi, and then you start learning away. But there is a challenge of learning at home, especially when we put this into a gender perspective, because you're not really just sitting at home. You're going to be doing something else while you're at it because you're a woman. And that is a challenge that a lot of people seem to not put into the matrix when they're thinking of, okay, let's make the kids learn from home, it's going to work anyway. You've actually got other social challenges that are a burden. Can you speak to those as a woman, as a female student?
All right. I would say first and foremost, we should note that there are still some existing traditional cultures among our society. And as much as we might want to say Zimbabwe has adopted the Western culture, this is where, to be honest, there still isn't equality between the ladies and the females in the family setup. So you find that most of the times the girl child is busy fetching water, cooking, and doing whatever she has to do to keep the house running. So in as much as we are thinking that she's learning, she might not actually have all that time, or even if she does get the time, she has to be doing this after her chores, and sometimes the brain is already stressed out and she has to sit for a lecture that she's watching online. And like he was saying, there's the issue of pop-ups that just come whilst you're watching that. We're all human, we are bound to be tempted. So it won't be as effective as it's supposed to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. And talking of the social challenges, we're getting comments here. Nyaradzo Francisca Kachepa says, are they giving us data for that? You know, very basic social problems that we're getting. And Tinevimbo Hazel Homera is also speaking to what Nyaradzo says and saying, especially in the rural areas, and not everyone is resourceful. It's not like we're actually going to rely on the government to provide all the necessary resources needed to put e-learning in motion. Looking back on the history of, well, she thinks they don't manage funds correctly. But basically what you're seeing is people saying, even from the get-go, that blended learning is going to be hamstrung, not only by those social things that we're talking about, that being a woman in the house and having other burdens, but also just very simple financial burdens like buying a bundle and what have you. But these decisions were made outside of consultation. We challenged the PERMSEC last week, a very affable man, if I should say so myself, and he conceded that, of course, there's a lot that needed to be done. But do you think your voices are being included, have been heard over the years? And I'll start possibly with Nigel, because you've been a student, you're a past student. Were your voices ever heard? And you were actually in the NCC of Say What. Were your voices ever heard whenever you try to engage?
Well, it depends where the voice is landing on, you know. If it's someone who's actually pragmatic in their approach, yes, they would be heard. They were heard. But in a nutshell, I would say no, because so many times, I was once SFC president as well. I advocated for stronger Wi-Fi at HIT where I studied, but you'd struggle just to open one page, just to open a PDF. So now I'm at
an institution of technology.
Exactly. Wow. I'm trying to think now, will it be practical to put a video online? I'm glad right now HIT has taken strides towards moving the technology when it comes to information technology and stuff like that. They've done a very good job, but it takes time for such institutions to implement what we'll be lamenting about. You see, like for example, that was what I'm talking about, something like that happened 6 years ago. We want stronger Wi-Fi, we didn't get it there and then we had to go to the library, cramp up in the library, and then at the end of the day, time is up, you need to move out, you have to go to town to get on the Wi-Fi, you know, those free spots and stuff like that. But I don't think right now, like she's been saying, e-learning won't do justice. Like, and other comments that came in, apart from data, I'm just thinking about the infrastructure, you know, and we
even the
learned
basic gadgets, because the first thing is,
you know?
in order for me to purchase data, I need to have the gadget to use,
Exactly.
and that's compatible.
This is why I'd said that time that it's like dancing with the devil.
Dancing
you know?
with the devil, indeed. Manashi, are people listening? You were told, for example, that you were just going to shut down, you're going to go home, we're going to go on lockdown, goodbye. Was the student's voice ever taken into cognizance? And when these decisions are made, do you think you matter?
Answering your question, Robert, I should say I've been very unfortunate through Say What to be on a lot of platforms where I have to be speaking about SRHR issues sometimes. I should say the problem is it seems like the world has, or I could say the nation has left this to people like Say What to deal with issues that have to do with the youth. But what they are not regarding, like I was watching the series last week, and I should say I had the professor commenting the government that Zimbabwe is one of the countries that have made a remarkable success actually towards attaining SDG goal number 4, getting everyone to have access to quality education. But I think now, as a nation, the point is no longer trying to get numbers of children enrolled in school, but making a follow-up as to how many of those students are actually finishing school. And when you then put that why question, that's when you get to trace back to the reasons that are causing children not to actually finish school. And it brings us back to SRHR. So it's to those people who are always asking, why are you so passionate about SRHR issues? These are not relevant because they all have to do with issues of self-control. You saying, I do not want to have sex, so you should not be asking for condoms because you just need to have self-control. And I say it's fine. But I was also fortunate to move around in the rural areas of Zimbabwe. And I was seeing that in some primary schools, children are not even getting to grade 7 because of pregnancies. So if it was an issue of self-control, then that could perhaps apply to us tertiary students since the world assumes we are adults. But what of those children who are in primary school and are still getting pregnant? So I think the government now needs to shift from trying to focus on getting more numbers of children enrolled in school and make a follow-up on having those children finish school. Then that means integrating SRHR on the agenda and listening to the youth's voices when we talk.
So we've got silos. So we're now delving also into another area and aspect of the social matrix that COVID-19 has put us in. But well, some are anxious about basics. For example, well, where will the money for the next semester come from? The rentals had already been paid, and it's a human needs disaster. Now, the Heartbeat team had the opportunity to interview students who shared their lockdown experiences, and we shall be sharing those today. And of course, that was at the behest of Say What, who actually wanted to get into the communities and see what the students were experiencing. They have shared their stories of fear, anxiety, uncertainty, challenges. And of course, we've got one of those students called Prince. Now, Prince Tarasada is a young man that we encountered in Manicaland at his family home. He spoke of his fears and his inhibitions thanks to the uncertainty around when they will reopen, which we talked about today, amongst a host of other youth-related worries.
My mother works in the informal sector. She's a hairdresser and she earns her money on a daily basis. And right now during the lockdown, people are not allowed to go to work except if you're working in the formal sector or if you work for the government or in the medical sector. So now it's a challenge for her even to raise the money to pay my school fees. It's really hard for her because even if she tried to cause people to do the hair at home, people are very afraid of traveling. And if they try to travel, they may even get arrested sometimes. So it's now really a challenge that I don't know what the future holds. So everything's uncertain at this moment. When it comes to education, everything was okay. Then suddenly things weren't okay. Because now we're studying using the e-learning process and stuff. But then most of the time, especially with this economic thing, having their bundles and tariffs going up every day, we can't really have access to the bundles. And now it's very hard to learn just as everyone else is doing, because not all of us have access to Wi-Fi and these bundles most of the time. So when it comes to these tariffs of data, which are going high every day, and it's really a challenge to some of us who do not have Wi-Fi, how are we really managing to cope with these things? Sometimes the lecturer sends assignments on the e-learning platform, and we do have friends who have a Wi-Fi at home. So now we're really trying by all means to work together as people, so that I may write my assignment today, then send to my friend, then my friend can send that assignment there. But then it's very difficult, because sometimes somebody feels obliged, like they are really waiting for me now, because they're now sending my assignment every day. So personally, as a young person in university, I think that the government has to provide a tariff specifically for students, which they have to use for their e-learning.
Internet poverty, another thing that we came across there. Now, these social problems keep coming as an avalanche. And you heard Prince's dilemma there, having to use somebody else's Wi-Fi and have somebody else send their assignment. And you know, Nigel, of how you're supposed to meet the deadline and for your own assignment, and how difficult that is, let alone having somebody send you their own assignment and then you're supposed to send the assignment on their behest. What do you see in for example, his presentation on Prince's dilemma, and how do you relate to something like that as somebody who was in his position and of course going forward with the COVID-19 the pandemic?
Well, Prince was genuine in his comments and in his thoughts, because if you look at it, like it all goes back to data. You heard him talking about data. Okay, fine. Let's say we want to copy how South Africa is doing it. How rest assured are we that we're going to get that data on time? You see, I don't want to delve into so many other examples for the sake of the conversation, but we know in Zimbabwe some things are delayed. Let's be factual. Some things are delayed. You know. And you hear that the lecturer posted an assignment on the e-platform, whichever e-platform the university is using. And then you're facing data challenges. You don't have money to buy data. You don't have access to the data. Probably the booster in your area had the battery stolen, so the network is weak. You see, in what you're saying, and then you contact me, Nigel, can you send me my email to my lecturer? I'm going to start to think that, hey, I forgot my password for my email. So you want me to log out of my email?
Absolutely. So it's an absolute mess. It's coming back to something that really tugged at my heartstrings. He talks of another thing about going back to school and not knowing where the money shall come from. And he says his mother is a hairdresser and she has to do that job and then get that money and then pay. And she had already paid, a lot of families had already paid and parted with money. And now he's anxious because he doesn't know where that money will come from. What provisions are there by government to waiver certain things and soften the landing, as it were, for parents. And you can imagine somebody who raises money from work such as hairdressing. That's a very big catastrophe. You've been working in communities and you've been seeing this as a social problem. We've already got a problem of basics and basic commodities. How does this then impact on our families who are very, very burdened, especially by education?
Also stressing on the point that you raised, the ministry say that the industries that are going to be opening are critical industries. And I should say, if we are to not, of the people who are employed, I think 3/4 of the people who are working in the critical industries are males, to start with. So that means all the families that are headed by single mothers, all the families that are headed by girls and female women, all those families are disadvantaged. Why? Because women are mostly in the tourism sectors, beauty sectors, and they are not considered critical at this moment. So that affects everyone who is entitled, of which in our traditional setup, the funny thing is the women are the ones who bear the burden of caring for children. Most men have a lot of children they are not taking care of in person.
Nigel,
they are staying with their mothers who are not working. You see? So that means all those children with those mothers are suffering. So even if the education system is to be opened up, those children's lives are still at stake. So I think we have to address that issue of what then happens to these families, because now gender is sort of also getting into the picture as an effect of the COVID-19.
Yeah, there definitely is a gender face to COVID-19. Perhaps you would want to weigh in on that. You were working on SRHR, you were a gender champion, you are a gender champion. And what are you seeing with regards to COVID-19 and that gender burden, as it were?
Like she rightfully put, many females work in the tourism sector, and right now the tourism sector is closed. And yeah, you know, so many women like to say that I'm an independent woman, I'm a hustler and stuff like that. But let's face it, right now in this particular time, the men are the ones risking their lives, going out, right, to make money, right? But it disadvantages the women now, who are, like what she says, who lead families. You know, the mother-headed families, I like to say, they are now at a disadvantage that they know that they can't outrun the police. You know, they need to get firewood, but there's a roadblock right next to her house. You know, how is she going to cook for her children? So this COVID-19, yes, in as much as we're trying to keep our health intact, it's putting a lot of burden on the mother or on the woman-headed families at the end of the day, you know. And I heard Prince talking about his mom being a hairdresser and stuff, and already facing challenges of providing for the family. And I was just thinking, now that data is going for what, $55 for what? For
just
a small package of data, you know. And you're not going to that same woman and be like, Mom, can I have $55? I need to write an assignment. But she's now thinking also about the younger brother who probably needs milk or maybe medication, and she only has probably $100 in an eco-cash.
And we've been on lockdown.
Exactly.
Well, but if you thought Prince's problem and the reopening question is only a student problem, think again. We spent time actually with Prince's mother, Mavis Mutike, who has been robbed of her only source of income, yet she has responsibilities, chief among them being her child's tertiary fees, paying for her child's tertiary fees, data costs, among other things. Now let's hear what she had to say.
Basa rangu gore rino raaffectwa zvakanyanya ne-lockdown, because handina kana pekutangira. Izvozvi zvinhu zvese zvinenge zvakamira, basa racho harisi kufamba, mwana ari kuenda kuchikoro, ari kudzidza pamba online. Saka ndinenge ndichida kutenga data, of which data racho raakudhura, zvinhu zviri kutongondiomerawo. Kana rent chaiyo yepamba ndinorenda imba inoyi. Saka zvinhu zvakaoma zviri kungondiaffectawo nenyaya yekuti hatisi kuenda kubasa. Hapana kana kuti ndinokwanisa kuwana mari. Even ukada kusheedza munhu kuti uya tigadzire musoro, umwe munhu anotya nenyaya ye-social distance.
Well, there you have it. We have been talking about these, and it's like the people are beginning to sound like a broken record because it's the same things. But the other problem is because our incomes have been put on hold because of lockdown, especially the first 2 seasons of lockdown, which were total lockdown. And on the other hand, life keeps working, life keeps moving on. The rental issue, because of course, while there may have been talk of not paying rentals and what have you, the truth is we'll have to face up with paying for the rentals. You don't stop eating because there's COVID, and she's got her day-to-day grind, her hustle, that's absolutely difficult and impairing her. And then this comes along, while on the other hand, she's not receiving anything on the one hand. So we have a serious burden. As a leader who works with younger people, who works with peers, what's your advice? Because this also has a mental stress and mental strain. How are you dealing with your mental stress with regards to this anxiety and what have you? And what would you advise others?
Well, I've been trying to engage myself into reading novels, you do a lot of things. You try this, you try that. 1 week down, next week you try to be hopeful, but sometimes you are stressed. And sometimes, you get into situations where that advice like, hey, you can pray about it, starts becoming a broken record, like you were saying. So I think sometimes this really is a time where we just all have to be strong, and in as much as we are hoping for the future, we just hope that they also put the youth in the agenda. And maybe all I can say is, whether or not the youth's voices are listened to, one thing for sure is that post-COVID and even during COVID, the issues that we are saying are not issues of essence, are going to be issues that have repercussions in our lives.
Absolutely. And we keep monitoring, of course, what you're saying out there, because we're getting Simbarashe Blessed Sitole trying also to wade into where to and what can we do as a nation? And he says a lot of focus and initiative should be directed towards unveiling education relief funds to push the e-learning agenda. And even if schools are to open gradually, some parents have stopped working. Their trades have been deemed unessential. A lot of students may not make it back to school even if the schools reopen. And that's something we haven't touched on. That's a sad reality, that somebody is just going to say, you know what, you may have been in your first year, you may have been in your third year, and God forbid, you may even have been in your final year, but I cannot afford to have you go back yet again. And you have to, either defer or find something else to do, because I'm really out of this matrix. I'm out of my depth. And that's what you was talking about following up on, never mind enrollment, but what's the success rate? Are they finishing? Are they graduating? Nigel, you've walked this journey, you've walked it twice, and you've seen the poverty, all things being equal, and now there's COVID-19 and the possibility of people dropping out. As a leader, as a youth leader, what does that say to you?
Well, basically, you're playing tempo run with life right now. That's the truth. And the world is not stopping. I remember Philly Chiang once said, the world is not waiting. In as much as we are in COVID-19, I like that Munashe spoke something about reading. This post-COVID-19 at the end of the day, And of course, you can talk about issues of not having money to continue school, but my advice to the youth is they need to keep reading. They need to keep, in fact, take this time to improve what they want to do, to improve on their vision, not just sit down and start blaming the government at the end of the day, you see. And also, I would also appeal to the private sector in Zimbabwe. I've heard the government talk about the grants they want to reintroduce. I think it was there pre-1980, the student grants. It's not only just the government's responsibility to educate a nation. It's also the responsibility of the private sector. Because remember, in Zimbabwe, we've got more state universities that are feeding manpower to private corporates. So it's high time these private corporates, give back by financing the grant system. I'm not saying we should copy exactly what other countries are doing, but you can make it as a loan. When you're done with school, you want a grant, and then say you sign a contract for the next 5 years, you'll be paying back the government. So that same money you're paying back is going to educate your little brothers, your little sisters, and whoever who's underprivileged. Because there's so many people out there who are very intelligent, but the fact that they do not have access to education, So I would say it's a collective effort. Both the youth, yes, you might need to be patient, but always remember to hold your government accountable. Do not be afraid to stand up and say these things, but in the most respectful way and in the most lawful way. And also the companies should also start thinking that, hey, we are not here to make money, we're here to educate a nation. So let's come together, let's move forward. Okay, if I had to put it this way, in a way, I would say COVID-19 has got benefits in a way, in the sense that it's changing the approach of how we should think. We're now looking inwards. So many companies are making hand sanitizer nowadays. That means we've got the solutions within. So let's just not take it as, yes, it's bad, it's really devastating, COVID-19, but let's take the advantage that it gave us to sit down back and think on how we apply our things in life.
Opened up our minds, our eyes, as it were.
Exactly.
And but we kept going around still in Manicaland. Another student, Joseph Sishiri, who is actually a Bachelor of Science in Economics student at the Africa University, also waded into the anxiety debate and told us about what he was doing in his own sphere. Let's hear what he had to say.
It was a surprise to me personally, because I had plans for the whole semester. I was looking forward to finish the semester just like anyone else who has passed through university. I was also excited that exams were almost closed, and eventually I was going to finish my college and then I move on. But like I said, it just happened like that. And the first few days I didn't really understand how I was going to position myself, especially with regards to finishing my academics and stuff like that. So I was a bit confused, and although I later on adapted to staying home and staying away from my friends, the usual class and stuff like that, and resorting to online. So it wasn't that good, but yeah, I'm adapting to the new environment. For e-learning, basically, it's something that I wasn't really much into. So it was something that I had to start without any notification. So it was quite a challenge to attend classes online, doing presentations, assignments, and stuff like that. So it's still something that I'm going through. Although it's a bit challenging, I feel like it's something that I was overlooking at when I started university, and it's also something that most people overlooked at. But now this is what we have to deal with.
Well, there goes. Learning something new. He had to learn something new. But when we're talking about how to deal with COVID-19, his story is very, very interesting, Mr. Shealy's story is, because he's got his, I believe people tend to view each other's statuses. And he had a lot of people who just view his status as a student leader and things like that. And so he had a challenge. He said, I think it was 24 or 48 hours, though whoever views my status should send this amount of money to my EcoCash or to this particular platform. And what will happen is I will then use that money to go and buy groceries and assist widows within my community. I think his target was around 2,000-3,000, and I think what he got eventually was little over 6,000. And he used that money, and people actually owned up, paid up, and he used that money to assist a disabled woman, widow in his community, bought groceries, because as you know, there are a lot of basics that people have no access to in the best of days in our country, never mind COVID-19. And then he went and ran that initiative, kept his mind busy, and did something that changed his community. So I suppose that's exactly what you're talking about, guys, when you're saying that, well, people should just improvise, become another person, get out of that comfort zone, get out of your skin, and be another person. And we're getting a lot of more information coming in through. We've got somebody speaking to Simba saying, I agree, it's a good initiative, but unveiling funds is one thing and putting the funds to actual use is another. So that's the question of accountability. People are thinking, if money is availed, that can happen, but will it go to the correct use, and will it be implemented and rolled out perfectly well? And Malon P. Vumbamera says this is a wake-up call for government to make accelerated actions towards investing in e-learning post-COVID, or perhaps during COVID, because I don't know, are we ever going to have a post-COVID era, or are we going to just be in the year of our disease? Is it going to be BC or after COVID, or we're just going to live with it in the year of our Lord and in the year of our COVID? But certainly we're getting a lot of challenges. And if you're just joining us, we have been sponsored here again by Say What and the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe to make sure that the students have a voice in the decisions that they have to make with regards COVID-19, which just came upon us just that suddenly. And of course, we're going to be having at least 2 call-in guests. But today, my guests in the studio are giving me some great insight of what it is to be a student in the COVID era, and what it is to look back and think, what if I was a student in the COVID era? You were lucky. This didn't happen to you, Nigel, and you don't share the same anxieties as her. But we're probably like people who get off a bus before it gets into an accident and kills everybody in it. So we've got this fear and think, what if we were these people? What do you feel when you look at her and what she has to go through and think, what if this were me? Because it didn't happen to you. But what if this situation she's in had happened to you? Do you get that fear?
Yeah, of course I do. It takes me back to when I did my master's thesis. I was working with a degradable quantity, you know, and I had to use it within 6 months because of the expiration date, you know. And I'm thinking on her part now that probably she might be in the same situation, and she's now facing to have to refund herself again, probably in the excess of thousands of US dollars, to start again those projects. So I really feel for these students. But the world has learned to live with pandemics before. We've learned to coexist with flu. We've learned to coexist with other sicknesses. So you know what strengths you have within yourself. What can you do to keep yourself relevant in this probably COVID era?
Interesting.
You know?
What can you do to keep yourself relevant? And I've got Nomsa on the line now. Nomsa, if you can hear me, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, and we hope we hope, Nomsa, can you hear me? I'm sorry, I think we've lost Nomsa, but very soon we're going to be having, I'm sure we're going to get her back anytime soon. But I actually wanted to ask her how, you know, she's coping with the new normal, how she's reinventing herself. And of course, that's a question we really need to ask. How are you reinventing yourself, Munashe? You're at home. You've reverted into being something else. You're no longer, because I know mom would say, and now they're really tired of you because people are like, they say she goes to university, she's always here, and we can't tell who's going to university and who's not. So who have you become?
Well, I should say my response to that question could be different from most youths, because unlike most people, I managed to discover that in as much as I love engineering as a profession, I have a passion for advocacy. So that's how I got to venture into SRHR advocacy. And for as long as I can remember, people have always been asking me, where is the relationship between engineering and SRHR advocacy? But like I said, it's the passion I just have this passion to have the young people's voices heard out there. And if I can be that person that someone can stand on for them to be heard, then I'm willing to do that. So I've actually decided to use this time to focus on that SRHR part of me. So I've managed to enroll for some online courses with ARASA, AIDS and Rights Alliance. They have a 5-week course, online course for advocacy on SRHR issues. That's what I have been putting my time into, and I've been trying to also research on how COVID is affecting the youth and what could be done. And that's how I was actually saying that, like I was saying, it calls for collective collaboration from the churches, the religion, society, even our parents, because some issues that are affecting us as youths, like the mental problems that we have, are because of things that we cannot discuss with our parents, because according to tradition, those issues are taboo, but they are affecting me. So I think as parents or the society, if we all collectively understand that there are some things beyond what we call the normal, mental health issues exist. Even in Zimbabwe, they are not just for white people.
Which is what we always say, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, I'm told I now have Saddam. And Saddam, if you can hear me, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for joining your colleagues here. And I hope you're managing to deal with lockdown at least a lot better than we are, it seems. And quickly, Saddam, what do you want to contribute as a voice, as a young person? Where do you think the authorities are leaving you out, and what do you want to contribute to the greater discourse and to the decision-making processes that affect you as a student?
All right, thank you so much, Rob, and thank you so much to viewers who are tuning in right now. I think we have been hit by a global pandemic, and this is a double crisis. We've got COVID-19 on the other hand, and now we've got the student on the other hand. The student has been heavily impacted by the adverse effects of this COVID-19 pandemic. Talk of learning, talk of social life, talk of economic life. You know, with this e-learning platform that is being introduced, you know, COVID-19 has actually brought about its own stressful. It has brought about its own induced fears, and this is piling on the transition mode that is going to happen from the normal learning mode to the remote online learning. And this is actually a taboo to the student body. You know, students are not a homogeneous group. and they must not be treated as so. We come from different places, from different families, under different situations. And coming in with these electrical gadgets is something which is difficult. And I appeal to the authorities to find a way that is suitable for each and every student, that encompasses everyone. Because, this thing is real. COVID-19 is real. And to the students' body, I want to urge them that during this time of change, yes, it's natural for our minds to think of all the usual activities that we should be doing at this time, but let's shift our focus. Let us focus on those things that we can utilize, that we can do around this time, alone moments that we have. This is the best time that we can create something meaningful for ourselves and for the nation, and we can contribute largely to the global nation.
And earlier, Saddam, you heard the minister, if you watched that, the minister talking about how the opening process is going to go, and he says, well, we're not in any rush to open up the colleges anyway, perhaps the final year students, but we're not in any rush because dead people do not study. Perhaps we cannot teach those who are deceased. What would you say if you were to meet your minister today and speak to him? What would you say directly to him with regards this way forward that the government has proposed?
I think on the proposition of opening the institutions for final year students, I think measures should be first put in place to make sure that they are safe. Because it doesn't make any sense to say, students, please come to the institution and learn. Learn how, yet you are learning in classes where we are 500 in a classroom. And the social distance, how are we going to do it? And students are actually coming from different areas. So my suggestion to the authorities, we need to wait and make sure that there is enough time. If you are going to go the e-learning route, then they should capacitate the student's body. If you are going to go that route of going physically to the institution, then we need to assess the environment so that we are there.
And that's a pretty interesting view, because actually a lot of these institutions are currently being used as quarantine centers anyway for COVID-19. So that's going to be a fear. If you're perhaps going to be asked to go back to university, how's that going to impact you, knowing that you're probably on that little bed where somebody who was suspected of having COVID-19 spent 21 days?
I think, we have been seeing news articles constantly, and we've been hearing politicians speculating news about this COVID-19 pandemic and of people being infected in these quarantine areas. And, for students to go back to the institution, this institution needs to be fumigated before students can be getting in. I'll be heavily affected by this thing, because the moment I get into the institution, it seems that there were people who were here, who were living with coronavirus, that is going to heavily impact me, especially mentally. How am I going to learn in such an environment where I'm hearing that there were people who have been kept here, and I've been hearing these horrible news about coronavirus? I'll be seeing death, I'll be seeing doom.
Well, Saddam, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming through today and speaking to us and being that assertive person and that strong person. And by the way, your name in Urdu Saddam means brave, fearless, forceful, and you have been that and a lot more today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Rob. I think my last word to the students' board is let us change the narrative from social distancing, but rather to physical distancing. Let us maintain our social relationships. Let us maintain our calling with our friends. Let's keep them close so that we can prevent these anxieties and stress. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Saddam Songwemi, there joining us, and I can see a couple of smiles here. When he said, let's change the narrative, Nigel, you broke into a smile and you went super bright. What about that statement spoke to you that much?
Yes, we are changing. Things are changing, but it doesn't mean you have to forget about people. I mean, you need to keep those networks. There's a statement which goes by your net worth is equal to your network. So if you forget your network in this COVID-19, I mean, you're losing everything for the post-COVID-19 or in the year of COVID-19, as you rightfully put.
And I've been actually making a lot more strange friends, because before COVID, you'd see somebody online and they strike you as very interesting, and you want to talk to them, and they're like, why are you coming into my DM? Or they would actually write on their status, I accept your friend request, and immediately you come into my DM. But now, That's where we're getting our contacts. And if somebody just comes to you and they're random, you look at them and you think, well, they've probably got something interesting to say. Because I've actually now managed to get a lot of very important and interesting characters, even from South Africa, from the United Kingdom, the United States, who I otherwise would not have had a link to, because they're sitting online now, and that's where they're having their interactions and work. And everybody now matters to them because we're all coming from the same platform. Instead of the other time, somebody would be like, well, I'm rushing to a meeting, I don't know this guy, so I'm probably going to respond next week. But now we're taking each other more seriously on social media. And social media has become less social and more business. So it's become business media, you know. So that's something absolutely fabulous. And I wanted to say, we used to work on a project where we would mark papers for young pupils, as it were, who were writing on issues to do with satellite dishes. And that's the only time you would see Nigel. And thanks to COVID-19, he's more and more available as our leaders. So as Saddam rightfully said, let us take advantage of the time we find ourselves in. But before we wrap up, if as it were, I think Dean Shealy Chaka, the chairperson of the Dean's Council, has a word of optimism and encouragement that he has for students, because as we said, we were talking about very gloomy things, very dull and dreary issues, but it's not all doom and gloom, and this is what he had to say to encourage our students.
Say certainly, you know, as a nation, you know, as a human race, we will certainly, you know, win this thing eventually. We don't know when or how, but I know that, you know, with resolve, you know, with persistence, you know, with hope, with prayer, we will conquer this COVID-19 pandemic. So we should not lose hope, you know, and I think the president was clear when he said, you know, the main thing that we should preserve is life. So the lockdown does continue, you know, it's for the good because we're trying to preserve life, you know, and it gives us an opportunity, like I said, to reimagine and reinvent our systems, even economic systems, you know. That's the model that we've been using, which is mainly, of course, capitalist in nature. Is it still relevant? It's time to question that. You know, let's start looking at some of our own indigenous knowledge systems, the way we lived before, you know. So it's really a time for Africa and for Zimbabweans to, you know, everyone has been equalized. So I'm encouraging, you know, the nation, encouraging our students especially to say, guys, we've got an opportunity here, you know, to reinvent and reimagine things and be the first, you know, on different levels.
There goes. Every cloud has a silver lining, and that's what Dean Chaka was speaking to. And of course, we heard quite a lot coming from all those who contributed. We failed to get no, but I think hopefully next week, as we continue this conversation, we'll have her coming through. And thank you guys for coming through. But before we wrap up, I will probably start with you, Nigel, and end on a beautiful note. So I'll start with you and say, what's your closing remark? What do you say to the students out there before we go out?
They should hold their head up, keep their chin high, and keep the focus. Remember, you need to find your relevance in this ever-changing world, because change is the only constant dynamic.
Change is the only constant dynamic. Now, before you wrap up, just a quick question for the misogynists and whatsoever, because that's been happening quite a bit recently. Engineering. When you say I study engineering, don't people look you up and down and think, oh, that's not a girl's something to do? And how do you deal with that?
Well, like you're saying, it's so sad. You know, even if someone is trying to hit on you, the moment you say I'm doing engineering, they're like, it's okay.
Oh my goodness! So that's so you have to up your social skills so that
you have to actually up
go on a date.
Yes.
Well, don't worry. We'll probably have you on another date here on Heartbeat, because we love you in spite of it's because actually of the engineering, because we like to hook up with the best minds in the country.
Oh, I'm flattered.
Oh, now just a quick goodbye to the people. What would you say to fellow students?
Well, to fellow students and to everyone at large, the beauty of life is it's complex. There's the social aspect, the physical, the spiritual, the financial, and the academic. So I'm sure of all those fives, surely COVID has not paralyzed all five for you. So find the one where you can actually work on, whilst COVID has paralyzed the other. For me, COVID could have paralyzed the academic part of my life because I'm not going to school, but I can work on the physical, I can work on the social, and even my spiritual relationship with God.
Thank you so much. And on that uplifting farewell to our people, I would like to say from me, Robert Mkondiwa, thank you so much for watching Heartbeat. And thank you again to the Swedish Embassy in Zimbabwe and to Say What. And of course, we've got yet another 3 that are coming down the line. And we shall continue to make sure that the students are brought into the matrix. Thank you to everybody who's watching. Thanks to everybody who's contributed by way of giving us those very profound comments that you gave to us. Heartbeat will be back next week. It won't be back in a heartbeat, but your hearts will be beating for us and our hearts for you. Have a great day.